All right, happy Saturday and welcome to the Countless Vlogcast. I'm your host, Justin Rich. My guest today is fantasy author, particularly grim fantasy author, Allan Batchelder. I'm going to bring him right in. We'll talk books, talk his series, and hope you guys enjoy it. All righty. All right, good afternoon. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
So tell us a little about yourself.
I am a an author, obviously, but also a professional actor. I have been for 35 years or so, and between musicals and Shakespeare, and then a lot of commercial work on television. And I was a stand-up comedian for 9 years, doing the Pacific Northwest comedy circuit, if you will. And I pay my mortgage by teaching. I teach impressionable young minds horrible things. Uh,
That, that's wonderful. So how does your creativity all come together in books? So you said you like do a little comedy, you do a little grim fantasy,
right.
you do a little acting too. So how does that all come together in your creativity? That's interesting.
Well, they say there are only a few real stories, a few different stories in the world, and I think what makes those few different kinds of stories unique are our personalities, who we are, what we bring to the story, and our personal life histories. So if you're telling a story about an orphan boy who grows up to become king, and I don't, by the way, that's not my story, but uh, how do you make that different from every other story about an orphan boy who grows up to become king? You bring your own personality to it, your own wealth of life experience, because you are what makes your story unique, I think.
Great, great. So when did you start writing, and how long you been writing for, like professionally? Like when did you start like scribbling, and when did you start being a professional like author?
So I started scribbling in middle school. I remember being given a short story assignment. We were supposed to go home and write 2 or 3 pages, and I came back with 27 the next day. So, and I just really enjoy it. You being able to imagine a world and put it down on paper and share it with other people. And as I've gone through life, I used to write Shakespeare style sonnets for people as opening night gifts in plays I was in. And I would write little satirical stories about mutual friends, to amuse them. But when my mom passed away in 2012, I think it was, I just said, time's running out. Time is running out. And if I'm going to do this thing, I better do it. And I am a big gamer, or I have been over the span of my life. Computer games. I've even helped write dialogue and do voiceovers for some computer games, but Dungeons and Dragons, role playing games. And I just have had an idea. I had an idea for a story in my own world. And when my mother passed away, it was really a motivation for me to live my life and get those things done that I dreamed of doing. Kind of a bucket list thing. And so the first story is Steel, Blood, and Fire. And when I first wrote it, I thought, well, this is a standalone novel, and it is standalone, but it's actually the beginning of a 5-book series. It's a story about a man, kind of like Conan the Barbarian, if you will. But this guy is a one-man army. He's literally destroyed entire armies by himself, entire nations. And he doesn't have any real sense of his past, of why he is the way he is or what he is. That he's just driven to fight and to battle and to destroy. And we find out over the course of the series that he's being manipulated. And the question is, by whom, and why does he have no memory, no real memory of his past? And he's the central character, but it really is a cast of thousands, kind of like a Shakespeare play in some sense, or even Lord of the Rings. And so there are comic relief characters, and there are tragic characters, and there are villains. But as the series develops, I really try to humanize them, because even villains believe in their own cause, and they don't gnash their teeth and hate themselves necessarily. They think what they're doing is the right thing to do. So it's won several awards, the series has, and it's gotten fantastic industrial reviews. And by that, I mean like Kirkus and Midwest Book Review and reviews from the industry, in addition to the usual reader reviews. So did I answer your question in all of those
No,
words?
that was great. So I was wondering what got you into the genre too. I introduced you as a grim fantasy author. So what got you into that genre? Explain that a little bit to the audience that may not know what that means.
Okay, yeah. So I write grim dark, and you're probably all familiar on some level with The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, and that's kind of the original genre in modern fantasy, I guess you would say. And the characters, the good guys, if you will, are all moderately well behaved, reasonably well behaved. You're never going to hear Aragorn dropping F-bombs or Legolas going on a sexist rant or something like that, because they're the good, and the bad guys are just bad. But you don't even hear the bad guys dropping F-bombs. By the time we get to Game of Thrones, you can see it's a lot more gray. There's so many shades of gray. And you look at a character like Jaime Lannister, who, when we first meet him, he's the most despicable human being. You know, he's having a relationship with his sister, and he has several children with his sister, and he cripples a young boy by pushing him off a tower. But by the end of the story, although he still loves his sister, he's a much more empathetic person and much less narcissistic. So Grimdark is really about reflecting all the different shades of gray in the world, and not pretending that there's a light and a dark and nothing in between, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense too. So would you say like Game of Thrones is some inspiration, and George R. R. Martin is some inspiration too? So when you like watching these shows or reading these books, so you get like influenced by them too, or have you always had that in your heart too to write this kind of genre?
Well, you know, I think your taste changes as you get older.
Yeah, it's like wine.
I just read a book about Bigfoot by the guy who wrote World War Z. And when I was a kid, this would have been the greatest book I'd ever read. I mean, I would have been all in. It would have been my religion. But now I'm 58, and I read it, and I was like, it's a good book, but I mean, it's about Bigfoot, you know. Your taste changes, and I mean, you know, look at the world we're in today. It's so hard to navigate and be a good person and do the right thing, because it's just everything's turned upside down.
Yeah, it's hard, like you said too. It's like even being an artist too, it's like you want to write what you want to write too, but you have to think of the audience too, though. I mean, who's your audience when you want to think about that too? And do you write for your audience, or you write for yourself too, from when you first started like, in your series to like now too, and as you've grown as the author?
You know, you raise a fantastic question, because if you spend too much time trying to please an imagined audience, you're not going to be able to create at all, not in a genuine and authentic way. I mean, I can't make people that I've never met happy, right? So I think initially you have to start with yourself. If you're a musician, you have to write music that you like. If you're a chef, you have to cook food that you would love to eat. And if you're a writer, I think you have to write for yourself. And it's a leap of faith. You trust that there are people out there who will go, yeah, I get what this guy's going for. I can relate. I understand. And then eventually you do develop a fan base. I have a fan base, and you start putting little Easter eggs in, or little gifts into the story to sort of reward your readers and, you know, fulfill their needs as well. But I think initially it has to come from you, and it just has to be something that you need to do.
Great. So, you seem like a very much so like a self-starter and like an efficient self-starter. Can you say yourself self-published, more self-published, or published author? Like, from the beginning to like now, were you like self-published, or did you use a publisher?
Yeah, so I started out, I was self-published through the Kindle program on Amazon, but I eventually found myself in some Facebook groups with other authors, independent authors, and they hooked me up with a publisher. My second publisher, actually, because I had a real small press publisher from the get-go, and that didn't work out. So I'm with Crossroad Press now, and it's a really great place to be. They've got some fantastically famous authors like Clive Barker, for instance, and Brian Lumley, and some great horror novelists. But yeah, I'm published now, and it's much better that way. It's great to be part of a team.
So, talk a little about that now, because I know authors out there, especially in the quarantine lockdown, they're like writing their books now, and not sure which way to go to. I talked to like many authors like during this time too. They said they're like self-publish, but it's like tough. So, what's different for you, self-publishing, like publishing? What's that like stands out? What's that spark that you got between you and that publisher that makes you really like stick to that?
Well, it is tough right now. You would think that during a quarantine, people would read more and they would buy more books in e-format, but it doesn't seem like people are rushing to read. And it's tough for writers too. And other artists. I've read posts from so many people on social media. I just can't do anything right now. My head is not in a good space. But I think when you finally find a publisher, or they find you, because I was recommended to Crossroad Press by a couple of authors, I think that it does boost your confidence, and it certainly boosts your cred in a certain way to have their logo on your book. And they do a lot of the formatting, and they do a lot of the small detail work that is annoying. You know,
And,
when you start out self-published, you're responsible for everything. You've got to find a cover artist, and you've got to format your book, and you've got to proofread it 50,000 times. And when you have a publisher, you get some help with that.
That's great. Yeah, can you speak a little more on that too, like in terms of like budgeting too? Because like a lot of times people really aren't sure though. Like you can Google search this too, but like we have expert now too, because you've been through like the like a rigmarole for like years now, so you understand the experience too. So if you give a little advice to somebody out there just looking for a publisher too, in terms of like budgeting and like cover and all that too, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I have a former student who's written a fantastic novel, but she, right out of the gate, she wants to find a big house publisher, or nothing really. That's her proposition, all or nothing. And so that's really, really hard to do. That's like hitting a home run your very first time in the big leagues. Like Ken Griffey Jr. did it, I think. But
Oh yeah,
you don't just step up to the plate and knock it out.
Speaking of, it's back too. Baseball's back too. It's great.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited. I mean, I can't go.
Weird. It was weird. It's weird watching it. It was weird watching. You know, like I watch Yankees. I'm a Yankee fans who's watching it on like TV with no fans in the stadium. They like virtual fans too. So it was weird though. But, you know.
Yeah, and how is that stuff going to go in the record books? You know,
I don't even know. Like, what did they can't even like. What if somebody hits like a home run? If like there's no fan can catch it though, nobody's gonna sell on eBay anymore. So it's like different experience though. Like I don't know. Well, it's interesting though during this time though.
It is a very strange world we live in.
But what are some of your present goals in this time too, in terms of the writing, marketing, or maybe like a hobby you're working on now that you may like expand on?
Well, I of course have other books that I'm working on in various stages, just sort of the conceptualizing stage, or I'm about 12,000 words into another book that has nothing to do with my first series. My next book imagines Shakespeare sailing to the New World in Jamestown at the start of slavery, in 1619. And so there's a lot of historical stuff going there. It's kind of historical fiction, except he runs into a monster. And I don't want to give too much away about that. But So it's sort of a historical fiction / monster novel. But I also am hoping to start a podcast that's kind of a variety show, so that it's got some current events. I'll have a guest on and really talk, to real people about their lives. But it also will have some comedy and some, because I'm a voice actor too, so I do, goofy voices and silly things like that. And it's just meant to be entertainment, but I want to fit books into it too. So I am a kind of a restless person. I'm always looking for something to create, some sort of creative endeavor to be involved in. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just sort of turning into a fungus.
Yeah, that's my next question was like the quarantine doesn't seem to affect you at all too. Like you seem like this like the Reddit like role too. So it's like when you first started like the quarantine lockdown, did you feel like you weren't as creative as you like usually are, or did you feel like the same, or like did you be more creative?
I definitely felt lost for a little bit, because I teach, I teach middle school students, and I did feel lost. Frankly, I mean, without getting too political, I felt lost since 2016. Like,
Yeah, we can relate to that.
Like I stepped through the mirror into, Never Neverland or
you
whatever.
watched Twilight Zone, yeah, Twilight Zone, like the Matrix. It's like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, everything that I thought was good is bad, and everything that I thought was bad is good. And I don't even know up from down anymore.
Oh, yep.
So that really made it hard for me to finish the 5th book in my series. I was cranking about my books are long. They're like 140,000 words, and I was doing about one a year, but it took me 3 or more years to write book 5. It was really hard to get done. And people joke about George R.R. Martin finishing Game of Thrones, or there's an author named Patrick Rothfuss, and people have been waiting for years and years for the next book in his series. But I could totally relate now. You just get into a weird headspace where you can't create, and it's not writer's block at all. It's just this kind of malaise, like the world sucks.
Yeah, I can relate to that too, because I do like poetry, I do videography, I do this vlogcast, and I do other like creative stuff too. I'm just like some days I'm just like I don't just want to do anything too, because I do sub teaching too. So I was doing that now, and I was like, all right, I'm moving forward in my life now. I'm thinking my next step to it, and bam, it hits you though. So it's like you gotta adjust though. You gotta adjust to your own too, because you can't rely on people. It seems,
And
So
you want to leave something behind, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So, who is your audience? Who do you want to expand to, like in terms of demographic fantasy too? I know that's like a subgenre, but in terms of like demographics and age and all that too, who's like your audience that you're like your fan base, and then who you want to expand to if possible?
Well, I've written in my advertisements and things that I don't recommend the books for anyone under, say, 17. Because there's, language and mature situations and violence and whatnot. But that's this particular series. Eventually, I have in mind a YA novel for young people, and I'm writing a steampunk too with my son. He's a graphic artist or a animator, and so he'll do some illustrations for it. So I'm going to try a bunch of different genres because I'm curious. Because I'm at this great buffet of creativity, and why would I only eat the chocolate pudding the whole time? I'm going to try as many different things as I can, and some people will like it, and some people will hate it. I remember when Chris Cornell from Soundgarden was. He did a song with Timbaland. Do you remember that?
Yes.
He did a whole album, and he got slammed by a lot of people. But I love that song. I'm in Seattle, and I wasn't even really conscious of Chris Cornell until I heard that song. And I went, man, that is a really cool song. And then I went back and I heard Black Hole Sun and stuff. And I went, wow, that's amazing. What range that guy has, So that's what I kind of want to do. And some people will slam me if I get away from grimdark, but you got to do what you what your soul wants to do.
Of course, it's like yes, artists and authors. It's like you can't get typecast too. Even like
Right.
if you're like your parents telling you, oh, you're like, oh, you gotta be in a box or something like that. You can't outside the box too. But you have to though. You have to explore everything. You know, you have to make mistakes too. You know, so it's like, what are you gonna do about that? You know.
Yeah, and you do get, I mean, in commercials, I do get typecast. I go to these auditions and there's 10 other bald fat guys, you know. And I guess I'm, you know, the goofy uncle or the neighbor next door, but nobody ever cast me as the romantic leading man, you know, or the villain or whatever. I guess I'm just too goofy looking. So
what is like give me like 3 things you want people to take away from the series? People that may have not read it or people that have read it. What do you want to take away from it too?
well, I hope that the characters have such a journey. Each individual character has such a journey that they're really memorable, that they're individuals, and every reader should have their own favorite. The central character is a guy named Tarman Vikers, but there are literally 50 other characters that you could fall in love with. And so I would love it if people had their own favorites. That's one thing. Another thing is, I just decided to do this one day, and I believe that you can do it, and my wife can do it, and everybody has a story to tell. Certainly, it's not to everyone's taste to write, but I'm not competitive about it. If you want to write a story, I'm there to help you. You know, give you whatever little advice I can and nudge you along the way towards success. So I hope that my work is an example that you can do it too. The readers can do it too. And generosity of spirit, you know, let's help each other. It's not a competition.
Yeah, not at all. It's supposed to lift each other up too, you know.
Yes.
Not taught that early on, but everybody's taught it's a competition, but it's supposed to lift each other up too. So speak a little on like the feedback of the books from your fan base and like Easter eggs. How have they perceived the Easter eggs? So have they received it very well? Have they gotten them, or have they like went over their head?
A
Without giving too much away. Without giving too much away.
No, I mean, I put so many Easter eggs. You do it sometimes just to keep yourself engaged. You know, you play little practical jokes on yourself, but I have little references to tons of other authors like Lewis Carroll and Edgar Allan Poe, and there's probably 1,000 little obscure Shakespeare references across all 5 books. And book 2 is a Shakespeare quote, "As flies to wanton boys." So there are lots of those little things in there, and sometimes I've incorporated or written characters based on people I know on purpose, and I've told them, hey, this is a character about you. One time I went to a charity auction and I auctioned off the right to appear in one of my books. In book 3, I wrote a bunch of characters and killed them off in a gruesome way, and that generated $500 for this charity. So so you might find yourself being decapitated or something in one of my books.
Great. So, being an experienced author and like having the series out there, could you give advice out there to young authors out there and like struggling authors, like in the time now?
Well, you know, yeah, it's an interesting question because Stephen King has given advice, and all the big authors do, and they say things like read every day, which I agree. But another thing that I've learned is a lot of people give themselves a word goal, like I'm going to write 500 words a day or 2,000 words a day. And what I say is even one sentence is more than you had yesterday. If all you can crank out is one single sentence, you're still moving towards your destination, just at a slower pace. So I would say, you know, do that at least put down one sentence and move forward. Don't beat yourself up if you're not writing or keeping up with other people. It's your own personal journey. I do think it is important to check out other books by other authors in your genre, and not even necessarily the famous writers like George R.R. Martin, but people at about your level of experience. You know, what can you learn from other beginners? Because again, the collective, of all of us put together is so much more experienced than any one person, you know?
So, who are some of your other influences in writing? Talk a little about Stephen King, George R. R. Martin. Who are some of your other authors that influence you, and what do you take away from them as you've grown as a writer too, in your own writing?
I am a big fan of Charles Dickens and Edgar Allan Poe, and I read all of the Lovecraft stuff early on. And when I was a boy, I would just read whatever my dad had just finished. I don't know why. Maybe I was trying to make him happy, or but if he read the Conan the Barbarian books and tossed them aside, I would immediately pick them up and start reading them. Or if he was reading John Carter of Mars by Ray Bradbury, I would read those books because he had read them. So that's kind of how I got hooked. But in terms of authors around my level or slightly above, I've read a lot of Charles Phipps, and I'm drawing a blank here. Ben Galley's written a series called Chasing Graves, which is fantastic, and Nicholas Eames, of course. Mark Lawrence is another one who's very prolific. He's getting up to the top tier of fantasy writers, if he's not already there. So I think Dirk Ashton has written a great series, starting with Paternus, War of the Gods. People about my level of experience, about my age, what are they writing, and what can I learn from their journey?
Great. So this is their time to plug yourself too. If you want to show any books you have written, any books in the series, so people to know where to look, social media, all that. It's
okay,
well, to plug.
I don't seem to have a copy of the first book, but I've got the second and third right here stacked under my computer. So this is book 2 in my series, As Flies to Wanton Boys. You can see it's a big book. And book 3, Corpse Cold.
I love that cover art. I love it. It's beautiful.
Oh, you should see.
It reminds me of Carrie with the hand sticking out at the end.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, book 5 is my favorite cover. It's by Felix Ortiz, and it's a giant creature entirely made of dead bodies rising up out of a battlefield to attack our protagonist. But you can find my books on Amazon and Google Play and Kobo and Smashwords and Apple. I think they're available at Barnes & Noble, or you can go to Crossroad Press. But the first book is called Steel, Blood, and Fire. And it's been around for 7 years now. And I've just been so excited and humbled, really, by the response that it's gotten. In all of those years, I've only gotten one negative review.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, from a person who didn't even finish the first chapter. So
yeah, what do they know? What do they know?
Yeah. I mean, you can't really review a play or a movie if you walk out in the middle.
Exactly.
So I feel okay about that. That's my story.
Yeah, so I like to end my vlogcast with a positive message from you to the audience out there. Anything you want to say to your fans, audience, people watching, that'd be great.
Yes, I feel like, during these times, we as a people can keep each other afloat, can keep each other's spirits buoyed, and we can support each other. Obviously, we're not going to get tons of help from beyond. And so I hope that my work can inspire beginning writers, younger writers, or fantasy fans. And I'm certainly there to help. I'm down to help whoever would find my advice useful.
All right. Well, thank you, Allan, for coming on and sharing your story about your series and everything. It's been a great interview.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. This has been the Countless Vlogcast with my guest, the grim dark fantasy author, Allan Batchelder. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you guys follow Allan on social media. Go to his website, buy his books, support, and also subscribe to the Countless Vlogcast on YouTube. Thank you guys for watching.